Welcome to Washington Hospital Today, the program dedicated to sharing timely information about the community hospital that's been taking care of Washington Township Healthcare District residents since it opened in 1958. Washington Hospital Today is provided for the sole purpose of informing residents about healthcare topics and issues that have been covered during community forums, free health and wellness classes, or as part of educational sessions held during the district's open board meetings. This program is one more way that Washington Hospital helps empower you, the residents of the district, by providing information needed to make informed decisions about your health.
Today's presenter is Mary Sun. Mary Sun graduated from University of California, Davis with a bachelor's degree in nutrition sciences. She earned her PhD in nutritional sciences at University of Wisconsin-Madison and has been working as an inpatient dietitian at Washington Hospital.
So let's just get started. This is a question I've seen before. Diabetes, is there an app for that? Now, how many of you actually own a smartphone? How many of you actually use your smartphone to track your health or to track your diabetes? Oh, well, you're in the perfect place right now. These are the topics I want to go over today. First of all, I want to touch upon the prevalence of diabetes because this provides us an understanding of why there's a growing market for health apps. Why should we use mobile apps to manage our diabetes? Is it even effective? What can you do to manage diabetes? Understanding the basics of self-management for diabetes is also important in making the right choices for these health apps. We'll talk about different types of health apps. And at the very end, we'll conclude with how should you choose the right health app. Having a bunch of health apps in your phone is just going to clutter your phone. That's inefficient. So let's just talk about how you can narrow down your choices so that you can find the right health apps that would work for you. So first of all, with the prevalence of diabetes, I really like to show statistics because that really gets everyone engaged. Well, this slide shows the trend in diagnosed diabetes in the United States from 1958 to 2015. This is through the CDC. The number of people diagnosed with diabetes, as you can see here, increased from 1.6 million in 1958 to 23.4 million in 2015. It's a very significant increase. And in terms of percentage of the US population, in 1958, if you take a look, less than 1% of the population was diagnosed, as opposed to 2015, where 7.4% of the population is diagnosed with diabetes. So the maps here also show the trend in the age-adjusted prevalence of obesity as well as diagnosed diabetes among US adults 18 years and older. I really like showing these maps, especially to my students, because it gets them thinking about the importance of this epidemic. If you look at this over the years from 1994 to 2015, you see that there's an increase in the prevalence of obesity. Same with diabetes. Looking at these maps, you can kind of see there's an association going on in terms of prevalence of obesity as well as diabetes. So being obese and overweight puts you at higher risk for type 2 diabetes. So for many patients, maybe the first goal in preventing diabetes is simply weight loss, and there are certain apps that do target that. And again, with more statistics and more numbers, why should you use mobile apps to manage diabetes? Well, with this increased prevalence of diabetes, when they did surveys on smartphone users out there, 2/3 of Americans actually favor digital health management over physical. What that means is 2/3 of Americans would prefer to use things like WebMD to diagnose themselves online rather than actually going to the doctor's office. 79% of Americans are willing to use wearable device to manage health. What that means is using things like Apple Watches, all those smart watches out there, Fitbits, pedometers. 79% of Americans are willing to use this to track their health and manage their health. 43% wanted mobile health apps to manage personal health issues or conditions, and this also includes diabetes. And in fact, if you go into, let's say, the Google Play Store, if you go into the Apple Store, you'll see that there are a number of apps associated with diabetes. Now, which ones are the best, we'll talk about in a sec, okay? But wireless broadband and smartphone users are expected to rise to 6.5 billion by 2018, the number of these smartphone users. This may, in fact, empower patients to better manage their diabetes through mobile apps. There's also some peer-reviewed studies that have shown that using diabetes mobile apps can significantly reduce your A1C. So your A1C is your 3-month average of your blood sugar. So many of these studies have shown that users who do regularly use these apps to manage their diabetes have reduced their A1C. So there may be a possible potential for any of you to use these mobile apps to help manage your health as well. I really like this statistic, mainly because I see this in my parents at home. Lookout, which is a security software, they did a survey in smartphone users and found that 58% of smartphone users don't go 1 hour without checking their phones. So this is very typical of those because we're so attached to our smartphones. For me, if I ever forgot my phone at home, it's almost like walking out the door without your pants on or forgetting to wear your pants. So if people are spending so much time using smartphones, maybe we could use some of that time to help you manage certain health conditions. So why is it important for you to manage diabetes, first of all? Well, with uncontrolled, poorly controlled diabetes, it can lead to these serious health complications. And I'm sure some of you have heard of this already through some of the other talks here so far, but these include blindness, kidney failure, chronic kidney disease down the line. Being diabetic already puts you at risk for heart disease and stroke, having a stroke in the future. Diabetics are also at higher risk for limb amputations, so loss of toes, feet, or legs. So controlling your blood sugar and managing your diabetes is very important from preventing or delaying these complications. Controlling your diabetes is important. Studies have also shown that controlling blood glucose close to normal helps to prevent and delay these diabetes-associated morbidities. So that's also why there's a growing market for these health apps and apps for diabetics. In terms of all these diabetes apps, most of these do require some basic knowledge of diabetes self-management. So knowing the basics of healthy eating, of a diabetic diet, the importance of physical activity, monitoring, such as checking your blood sugar regularly, as well as taking medications as indicated by your doctor. Knowing all of these basic knowledge is still important. These applications, these smartphone apps do not replace doctor visits. They don't replace any sort of diabetes education. So they're supposed to be there to help you manage diabetes. So first of all, with healthy eating, let's just go over kind of the basics. Diabetic diet, it's always important to identify the carbohydrates. So knowing why identifying carbohydrates for a diabetic diet is important is also something that you probably want to follow up with your doctor or go to an outpatient clinic to see a diabetes educator. If you want to go up a notch, there's carbohydrate counting, and some of these apps do require prior knowledge of carbohydrate counting. For healthy eating, of course, this is the basic plate method shown here. It's portioning your carbohydrates per meal. So what you see here is a 9-inch diameter plate, and 1/4 of the plate is the carbohydrate. So it could be corn, it could be rice, it could be potato. The other 1/4 would be your lean protein choice, and then the other half of the plate consists of non-starchy vegetables. Okay, so this is kind of the basics of healthy eating, and knowing this is also important before using many of these diabetes apps. active, physical activity can help to reduce blood sugar. So the dietary guidelines recommend that you have at least 150 minutes, which is about 2 hours and 30 minutes of moderate intensity aerobic activity a week. What that means is basically brisk walking throughout the week. It also recommends muscle strengthening that's 2 or more days a week. Of course, for many of the elderly patients who aren't medically able to exercise like this, setting small goals such as walking 20 minutes a day is better than nothing. So work with your dietitian, work with diabetes educators to help set these goals. Monitoring is very important. It's a very, very important component of diabetes self-management. Having a glucometer. So many of these apps, they won't measure your blood sugar for you. You have to have your own glucometer. Many of these apps will remind you when you should measure your blood sugar, but these do not replace glucometers. Taking medication, whether that be oral or an insulin, taking these regularly is also important. A lot of these apps actually help you to remind you when to take your medication, or if you're on an insulin regimen, some of these apps really help you to keep track of the dosages that you're using. So now let's move on to types of health apps. There's different types of health apps. I kind of broke it up into different categories. There's diabetes logbooks. So these apps are there to essentially help you keep track of your blood sugar, keep track of your food intake and your physical activity. There aren't many educational apps out there for diabetes, unfortunately. There is one which I will talk about later today as well. There's also calorie counting apps. So I'm sure you've heard of some of these already. But calorie counting apps are geared towards helping you to eat healthier, tracking your calorie intake. Many of them also include nutrient analysis. So it has these nutrient information. Let's say you're unsure how much carbohydrates are in the sandwich you had. These apps will be much more helpful for you in determining how much carbohydrate you had in that one meal. Exercise. So these physical activity apps are to motivate you to increase physical activity. So these could be pedometers. In fact, if you have a smartphone already, you have an app, Apple iPhone, if you have an Android, they have built-in health apps already. They have built-in pedometers. So as you're walking around right now, your smartphone is actually already tracking your steps. So you don't have to spend the extra money to buy a fancy pedometer because it's in your smartphone already. So let's start with this My Sugar Diabetes Logbook. This might be more for the tech-savvy people. My Sugar Diabetes Logbook was created by people with diabetes. So their co-founders are both type 1 diabetic. And it's a little bit geared more towards the type 1 diabetics. So what this app does is it tracks your blood sugar throughout the day. It tracks your food intake. So with this app, you need to have prior knowledge of carb counting. So you could take a picture of your meal, but you have to enter how much carbohydrate is in that meal. It will not determine it for you. You can also enter an activity level. This can include, let's say, I'm sitting at my desk at work, or I went around for a walk. Also, after a certain amount of time, My Sugar also can give you an estimated A1C. So that's your 3-month average. It's basically like the report card that you receive from your doctor's office sometimes. Another good thing about My Sugar Diabetes is that it can provide this printable report for you. So if you need to go see your doctor, or if you're seeing your dietitian, your diabetes educator, you can bring them a printable version of everything here. So that might be helpful. It's compatible with Android and Apple. So this gives you, this is just a screenshot of what My Sugar Diabetes looks like. There's also a little monster, which we'll talk about that in a sec. So if you look at these screenshots of My Sugar, it gives you a picture of today, let's say what your average blood sugar is. Then it tells you the standard deviation, so the deviation between that from your average. Also, if you're having issues with hypos, it also tells you how many hypos you had throughout the day, how many hypers. It also tells you your carbohydrate intake. If you look at the second screenshot, this is what it looks like when you're entering something. So all of these have to be manually entered. They don't really sync with glucometers, but I think this one syncs with AccuCheck glucometers. But to sync it with AccuCheck, you may have to upgrade it to a non-free version of this application. But if you look at the interface, it's very pretty, or cute, I guess you could say. Like I said, this might be more for the tech-savvy people. They have that monster, and that monster, you can name your monster actually. So the goal of this is to motivate you to continuously enter data throughout the day. So anytime you take some sort of action, which is entering your blood sugar, entering your food intake, or entering activity, you get points throughout the day. And when you reach a certain number of points, you can tame your monster. So in a sense, this reminds me of the electronic pets we had when I was little called Tamagotchis. We used to take care of those and have to feed them. And I slept with mine. It was a tiny little round pet that I put next to my bed and feed every single day to make sure he didn't die. So this kind of follows the same kind of concept to motivate you to keep track of your diabetes. Glucoracle is actually very interesting. Glucoracle is a research project done by the Department of Biomedical Informatics at Columbia University. It's an ongoing study, but this app actually keeps track of your meals, and more interestingly, it forecasts your blood sugar. So this app has this personalized mathematical algorithm to mimic your endocrine system. So this may be a good way for you to make healthier choices. So if you're putting in a certain meal that you want to eat, or let's say you're at a restaurant, you're looking over the menu, you don't know what to decide, and there's one menu item, one entree you really want, you input it into Glucoracle, it could tell you this is what will happen with your blood sugar. So it might give smartphone users definitely a better picture of what their blood sugar will look like to make more informed choices with their meals. Glucoracle is ongoing. They're continuously updating this. They did a few studies to compare how accurate the forecast is to what the blood sugar is in reality, and they said that it's pretty close, but more studies are needed. Glucoracle is available for Android and Apple, so if you want to try something new, this might be a good app. Glucose Buddy. Glucose Buddy is good for those who might have an older smartphone because Glucose Buddy has not been updated for years. It's been there since 2012, I believe, because it was developed by a UC Berkeley student as a project. So Glucose Buddy, if you look at it, if you look at the desktop design, the interface, it looks very simple. It's kind of like what Apple used to look like in the very beginning of times when you first got your Apple iPhone. It's very easy to just put in your information, put in your blood sugar, put in your food intake, your activity. And in fact, on here you can also include your blood pressure if that's also something you're keeping track of. So Glucose Buddy is available through Android and Apple. So if you have an older phone and you want a simpler design, not too tech savvy, this might be the right app for you. Another great app I found was the blood glucose tracker. So this is for those who just simply want to keep track of your blood glucose levels. If you're one of those who like to look at numbers to help motivate you to manage your diabetes, this might be a good app for you. It's a simple way to track your blood sugar throughout the day, and there's pretty much no other real function to this besides tracking your blood sugar. So this might actually be the right app for you if you don't want all the other stuff that My Sugar had. Also, the one downfall to blood glucose tracker is that it's only available on Android phones. Now, let's move on to educational app. This is probably the only educational app I could find, but this is called Carb Counting with Lenny. Let's say your weak point is basically with the whole healthy eating identifying carbohydrates, carb counting. Well, carb counting with Lenny is a fun, interactive way to learn which foods contain carbohydrate, how much carbohydrates are in certain servings of food. So this helps both children with type 1 diabetes as well as adults to learn about carb counting. It's really fun. Lenny the Lion really helps you out. It's a good way to monitor your carb intake. You can use it for both Android and Apple phones. So these are just some screenshot examples of what carb counting with Lenny looks like. But for example, they have these activities where you can look at this chocolate milk, this 1 cup of chocolate milk, and then I'll ask you, is there carbs or no carbs in here? Now, can some of you kind of guess already? Is there carbs in this chocolate milk or no carb? Yes. Excellent. Now, what about this glazed donut? Okay, so this is a different game they have, which is called Guess the Carbs. How many carbs do you think is in this serving of glazed donut? 30. Excellent. See, this is a fun, interactive way for you to learn about carb counting. So moving on to calorie counter apps, and again, carb counting with Lenny was probably the only good educational app I could find. If you want information about a diabetic diet, about healthy eating, I highly advise going to an outpatient clinic, going to group classes, and also coming to Diabetes Matters as well to learn about any new topics we have here. So MyFitnessPal is a calorie counter app. This is probably one of the most popular apps out there. Those who just simply want to lose weight use MyFitnessPal. I've seen a few diabetic patients as well who say that they use MyFitnessPal to track their meal intake as well as physical activity. So the great thing about MyFitnessPal is the fact that they have a huge database. They have more than 6 million foods in their database, and they have this barcode scanner feature where you can scan barcodes on food items and it can automatically pop up with the nutrients in there. So you can automatically see how much carbohydrate is in there, how much calories is in your food, how much fat is in there. MyFitnessPal, like any other app, also has a goal setting function. So you could set goals for how many calories you want to take in every day, how much physical activity you would like to have every day. So for instance, if you look at this one, it'll tell you your goal is 2,440 calories. In terms of food and exercise, you have a remaining of 2,226 calories. Now, having these numbers here can help you decide whether or not should I have this donut or should I have this chocolate bar in the afternoon, right? When you're looking at these numbers and seeing what allowance you have left, it's like having money throughout the day, how much cash you have on you. You have $20 in your pocket. You've already spent $10 more than half the day. At night, how much can you have left? What can you use? So these screenshots show they have a huge database. This is for Luna bars, so they have it for all different sorts of brands out there. It's easier for you so that you don't have to manually input all these food labels. So they'll have it for you. You can also just simply scan that barcode and it pops up with that peanut butter cookie. There's also My Net Diary. My Net Diary is very similar to the MyFitnessPal. It's also a calorie tracker with a very large food database, and it also has the scanning function as well. It tracks your activity, but another thing with My Net Diary is that it can also track your blood glucose level. So it might be helpful for diabetics. It can also help to track blood pressure. It can actually track a number of things. You could track your lab values, your cholesterol level. So there's a lot of functions with My Net Diary as opposed to the MyFitnessPal. Another good thing about My Net Diary is that it can sync with wearable smartwatches, so Apple smartwatches, the Android equivalent. It can sync with those so that you can, if you set up reminders, it could automatically pop up on your smartwatch. So this is compatible with both Android and Apple. These screenshots kind of give you an idea of what My Net Diary looks like. It looks kind of similar to the MyFitnessPal, if you could see, with how you would enter food from the database. One of the other good things about MyNet Diary is it has this forum, this community, so you can interact with other people as well who use MyNet Diary to motivate each other to reach their goals. I'm sure you've all heard of this, but Fitbit, I had to talk about Fitbit because in terms of exercise, if that's something you want to focus on is increasing physical activity, having a Fitbit or any pedometer, wearable pedometer, actually helps to motivate you to increase your steps throughout the day, to help you be more physically active. Fitbit also has this challenge, so it's synced with your Facebook. So if some of your Facebook friends have Fitbit, you can have challenges with them to try to beat their steps throughout the day. So if that's the way that motivates you, I know my fiance is super competitive. So this is one way he gets his activity level up is by competing with his friends. He's very competitive when it comes to his friends. Fitbit also has a sleep tracker, and we all know that sleep is also important for diabetics. So getting enough sleep, getting the 6 to 8 hours of sleep is important. So Fitbit also has that function to track sleep. Some of these Fitbits also have a heart rate monitor, so you can also track your heart rate on there as well. If you have the Samsung Health app, or if you have a Samsung phone, the Samsung Health app actually has a heart rate monitor on there. So if you take out your phone and you look at the back of your phone here, you could put your finger on here and it will measure your heart rate, especially for a Samsung phone. So if you ever want to try that out, you could definitely try that out at home. Fitbit also syncs with not only apps on your phone, but Fitbit can also sync with your computer. So if having an app is not your thing and you want to see it on your computer, or you spend most of your time on your computer, you can also sync it with that. So in terms of the computer dashboard, this is what Fitbit looks like. As you can see, they have these bar graphs to help track your activity throughout the day. It also can track your activity day by day throughout the week as well to see, oh, maybe on Mondays you're less active, but on Tuesdays and Thursdays you're much more active. It could also help you with goal setting that way. They also have these badges. If you get these badges from walking, let's say 15,000 steps today, you get a certain badge. You walk 20,000 steps today, you get another badge. So it's a way to encourage you to basically challenge yourself. They have calories on this dashboard, so they do have a small food database in here. You can enter some entrees you've had, if you had spaghetti, if you had soup. In fact, last time when I tried using this, they had some foods from Sweet Tomatoes. So you can also input some entrees, some food items from restaurants on here, and it gives you the calories. However, it does not give you the amount of carbohydrate. So instead of giving you the amount of carbohydrate, what you see is percentages of macronutrients. So it'll tell you there's 3% carbohydrate in here or 10% carbohydrate in here, but it doesn't tell you the amount in grams. So that's kind of the downfall for this. I wanted to share this because this is a free resource online. So you don't need to download an app for this. This is through American Diabetes Association. A lot of patients do have questions about eating healthy. How do I follow the plate method and still manage my blood sugar? So this Create Your Plate method helps you to visualize your meal. It's the same thing I talked about earlier. It's the 9-inch diameter plate. However, the best part about this is if you actually click on many of these different categories like the protein, the grains and starchy foods, non-starchy vegetables, it gives you a list of different food items. So let's say the non-starchy vegetables, it gives you cauliflower, broccoli, spinach, all these different non-starchy vegetables. So it's almost like teaching you what are non-starchy vegetables, what can be on that other half of the plate. Same with the grains and starchy foods. You could see it comes off with a list of all of these carbohydrates essentially that goes in that other quarter of the plate. So this is an interactive, educational, online resource that you can look into if you're interested in meal planning. Finally, I'm sure you're asking this question after seeing all of these different apps, but how do you know which app is right for you? Here's a way to answer your question in terms of maybe helping you to decide which app might be right for you or what might be more exciting for you. But I want you to remember that these apps, again, don't take place of any sort of diabetes education or professional diabetes education or doctor visits. So after talking to your doctor, after talking to diabetes educators and a dietitian, you can set goals. Think about what part of diabetes self-management you need to work on. Is that weight loss? Do you need to be more active? Find different apps or different ways to motivate you to be more active. Is it healthy eating? If healthy eating is your struggle, some of these apps like the MyFitnessPal may be better for you in terms of motivating you to eat healthier by keeping track of your calories and actually seeing numbers. So how many calories are in that sandwich you had for lunch? How many carbohydrates was in there? What about reminders? Do you need reminders for taking your medication, checking your blood sugar? Do you need help keeping track of your blood sugar? A lot of these diabetes log books like the My Sugar, Glucoracle, the Glucose Buddy, the blood glucose trackers, they're all meant to help you keep track of your blood sugar level. But if that's not something you're looking for and you're mainly looking for more of a motivational app, maybe things like MyFitnessPal or things like a pedometer might be more helpful for you. But remember, there's no single app that does it all. So if you're looking for one single app that does everything, that acts like a pedometer, that tracks your blood sugar level, that estimates your A1C, that keeps track of your insulin dosage, your medication dosage, there's not one single app for that. So really focus on what your goals are for diabetes self-management. And some extra resources. So I really recommend American Diabetes Association. Their website also includes great recipes as well for diabetics. EatRight.org through the Academy of Nutrition Dietetics. All of their articles are written by registered dietitians. Diabetes Health Magazine is also a good resource as well. In fact, Diabetes Health Magazine also has an app, so you can actually read all of their magazines on your phone as well. And of course, our outpatient diabetes center here through Washington Hospital, which is just right over on Beacon Avenue. We do offer group classes and individual counseling sessions. So if you need more education, definitely look towards that. Thank you very much.